When Dr. Grayson screamed, "I hate you, working with you is torture," right in the middle of the ER, I just smiled and walked away. He had no idea that just 72 hours later, he would be lying on a stretcher, clinging to life. And the worst part for him? He was about to find out that the only blood in the entire state that could save him was flowing through the veins of the nurse he despised. Revenge isn't always served cold. Sometimes it's a warm, red lesson delivered through an IV. Did I save him, or did I let karma take its course? You won't believe what happened next. Before we get to the most critical moment of my life, please subscribe to the channel and let me know in the comments if you believe in karma. Now let's go back to those cold hospital corridors in San Antonio where it all began. My name is Peyton Rivera. I'm 33 years old and I'm an ER nurse at the busiest trauma center in San Antonio, Texas. Most people think our job is just to assist doctors, but the truth is, doctors diagnose, but we are the ones who keep people alive. I love my job. I'm disciplined. Protocols aren't just rules to me, they are a patient's life insurance. But for Dr. Lucas Grayson, the hospital's so-called golden boy, I was nothing more than a speed bump. Lucas was 35, brilliant, incredibly talented, but arrogant beyond belief. He thought his hands were magic, but I was certain his heart was made of stone. To him, my strict adherence to every procedure was just incompetence or slowness. The tension between us was like a powder keg waiting for a match, and that match was struck during Tuesday morning rounds. The ER was overflowing that morning. I was inserting an IV line for a young car accident victim, meticulously following sterilization protocols to prevent infection. Lucas ripped the curtain open. His eyes were bloodshot, probably from lack of sleep, but that was no excuse. He roared, "For God's sake, Rivera, this isn't a beauty salon. What are you waiting for to stick that needle in? A written invitation?" I looked up calmly. "Dr. Grayson, the patient has glass shards on their skin. If I proceed without cleaning the area, I risk sepsis. That is the protocol." That answer was like a slap to his ego. His face turned bright red. I felt the other nurses, interns, and even patients holding their breath. Lucas threw the file onto the metal tray with a loud clang that echoed down the hall. He stepped into my personal space, looked me dead in the eye, and spat out those poisonous words. "I hate you, Peyton. Do you understand? Working with you is torture. You are a shackle around the ankle of this hospital. I wish the chief would just accept your resignation and send you where you belong, a nursing home." Silence. Deadly silence. The interns looked away. No one dared to say, "That was too much, Lucas," because he was the star surgeon and I was just the boring rule follower. My eyes stung, but I didn't let a single tear fall. I squared my chin. I didn't yell back. I didn't insult him. I just took a deep breath and said, clearly enough for everyone to hear, "Patient safety comes first, doctor. If you're finished, I will continue caring for my patient." Lucas stormed off, but those words, "I hate you," they stabbed me like a knife. That night, my hands were shaking as I took off my scrubs. I looked in the mirror and promised myself, one day they will understand my worth. But even I couldn't predict that God, or karma, would work this fast. It was exactly 3 days later. I was on the night shift. Outside, rain was pouring down in sheets. The static crackle of the radio cut through the quiet of the ER. Code blue, severe trauma, vehicle collision, driver trapped, critical condition, ETA 2 minutes. We geared up at the bay doors. The ambulance sirens tore through the dark night. When the back doors flew open, they unloaded the stretcher. The patient's face was covered in blood and glass, unrecognizable. But that expensive watch? I knew that watch. The paramedic yelled, "Pulse is thready! Massive abdominal bleeding!" When the chief, Dr. Miller, cut open the bloody shirt, we all froze. Time stopped. The man lying on that stretcher, fighting for his life with a tube down his throat, was Dr. Lucas Grayson. But the real shock wasn't seeing him there. The real disaster struck when the lab results flashed on the screen. Lucas needed surgery immediately, but his blood type wasn't just rare, it was almost impossible to find. He had AB negative with an extremely rare Rh subtype called null, sometimes called golden blood because there are only about 43 people in the entire world who have it. The hospital blood bank had nothing. We called every hospital in Texas, then expanded the search to Louisiana, Oklahoma, New Mexico. Nothing. 0 matches. Time was slipping through our fingers like sand, and Lucas was bleeding out on that table. Dr. Miller was sweating, barking orders into 3 phones at once, but I could see the panic creeping into his eyes. We had maybe 40 minutes before Lucas would be beyond saving. That's when the lab tech, Maria, came running down the hallway with a printout clutched in her trembling hands. She was out of breath, her eyes wide with disbelief. Dr. Miller snatched the paper from her and his face went completely white. He looked at me, then back at the paper, then at me again, like he was seeing a ghost. "Peyton," he said slowly, his voice shaking slightly, "you're a match. You're the only match within 500 miles. The words hung in the air like a bomb that hadn't exploded yet. Every single person in that room turned to stare at me. The interns, the nurses, the anesthesiologist, everyone. They all knew what had happened 3 days ago. They had all heard Lucas scream that he hated me. They had all watched him humiliate me in front of the entire emergency department. And now, my blood, the blood flowing through the veins of the woman he called a shackle, was the only thing standing between him and death. I felt my heart pounding in my chest like a war drum. My hands were cold. For a split second, a dark thought crossed my mind. I could walk away. I could say I felt dizzy, that I wasn't feeling well, that donating would put me at risk. No one could force me. No one could judge me. Lucas had destroyed my dignity, crushed my spirit in front of my colleagues, made me feel worthless. Wouldn't it be poetic justice to let karma do its work? But then I looked at him, lying there on that table, tubes coming out of his mouth and chest, his skin pale as death, and I saw something I had never seen before: vulnerability. Lucas Grayson, the arrogant trauma surgeon who thought he was invincible, was just a fragile human being fighting for his next breath. Dr. Miller was still staring at me, waiting for an answer. The clock on the wall seemed to tick louder and louder. 38 minutes, 37. I closed my eyes and heard my grandmother's voice in my head. She used to say, "Peyton, mija, when someone shows you who they are, believe them. But when life gives you the chance to show who you are, don't waste it." I opened my eyes and looked directly at Dr. Miller. My voice was steady, clear, and calm. "Prep me. I'll donate. A life is a life, and I won't let anyone die on my watch, regardless of how they've treated me." The relief that washed over Dr. Miller's face was immediate, but I could see something else there too. Respect. Maybe even admiration. Within minutes, I was lying on a gurney next to the operating room, a needle in my arm watching my blood flow through a tube into a collection bag. It was surreal. The very blood that Lucas probably thought was worthless was now the only thing that could save him. The nurse holding my hand whispered, "You're a hero, Peyton. Not everyone would do this." I didn't feel like a hero. I felt tired, emotionally exhausted, but I also felt something else, something I hadn't felt in a long time: peace. I knew I was doing the right thing, and that knowledge was stronger than any grudge I could hold. The surgery lasted 6 hours. I wasn't allowed in the OR, obviously, but I waited in the staff lounge with a juice box and a blanket, feeling lightheaded from the blood loss. Other nurses kept coming in to check on me, bringing me cookies and tea, telling me how brave I was. But all I could think about was what would happen when Lucas woke up. Would he even remember what he said to me? Would he care that I saved his life? Or would he just go back to being the same arrogant jerk he always was? Finally, Dr. Miller came into the lounge, still in his scrubs, his surgical cap pushed back on his head. He looked exhausted but relieved. "He made it, Peyton. Lucas is stable. The surgery was successful, and your blood transfusion saved his life. Without you, we would have lost him on that table." I nodded slowly, trying to process everything. Dr. Miller sat down next to me, his voice dropping to a more serious tone. "I'm going to tell him everything when he wakes up. He needs to know what you did. He needs to know that the person he treated so poorly was the only reason he's still breathing." I wanted to say something profound, something that would capture the weight of this moment, but all I could manage was a tired smile. "Just tell him to follow protocol next time. It saves lives." Dr. Miller actually laughed, a short, surprised bark of laughter that broke the tension in the room. "You're something else, Rivera, truly." Lucas remained unconscious for 2 full days. I went back to my regular shifts, trying to act like nothing had changed, but everyone in the hospital knew what had happened. People looked at me differently now. There was a new respect in their eyes, a quiet acknowledgement that I had done something extraordinary. But I didn't want to be treated like a saint. I just wanted to do my job. On the 3rd day, I was restocking supplies in the medication room when Dr. Miller found me. "He's awake, Peyton, and he's asking for you." My heart skipped a beat. Asking for me? That didn't sound like the Lucas I knew. I followed Dr. Miller down the hallway to the private recovery room where Lucas had been moved. My hands were sweating. I had no idea what to expect. Would he thank me? Yell at me for not letting him die with his pride intact? Pretend nothing had happened? Dr. Miller opened the door and gestured for me to go in. Lucas was sitting up slightly in bed, still connected to monitors and IV lines, his face bruised and bandaged, but his eyes, those sharp gray eyes that used to cut through me with contempt, were different now. They were filled with something I had never seen before. Shame. He looked at me for a long moment without saying anything. The silence stretched out, heavy and uncomfortable. Finally, he spoke, his voice hoarse and weak. "Dr. Miller told me everything. He told me that you were the only match, that you donated your blood to save me. After everything I said to you, after the way I treated you, you still saved my life." I didn't know what to say, so I just stood there waiting. Lucas looked down at his hands, the hands that had performed countless surgeries, the hands that he believed could fix anything. "I don't deserve your kindness, Peyton. I was cruel, I was arrogant. I convinced myself that you were the problem, that your insistence on following every protocol was just stubbornness. But the truth is, I was jealous." That word hit me like a truck. Jealous? Lucas Grayson, the golden boy, jealous of me? He must have seen the confusion on my face because he continued, his voice cracking slightly. "I was jealous because you have something I lost a long time ago, integrity. You care about every single patient like they're your own family. You never cut corners, never compromise, never let ego get in the way of doing what's right. And I hated you for it, because every time I looked at you, I saw everything I used to be before this job turned me into an arrogant machine. I became so obsessed with being the best, with being the fastest surgeon, with having the highest success rate, that I forgot why I became a doctor in the first place. I forgot that we're supposed to save lives, not feed our egos." The raw honesty in his voice was shocking. This wasn't the Lucas Grayson I knew. This was someone completely different, someone broken open by his own mortality and forced to see himself clearly for the first time in years. I pulled up a chair and sat down next to his bed, still not entirely sure what to say. Part of me wanted to accept his apology and move on, but another part of me, the part that had been wounded by his words, needed him to understand the full weight of what he had done. "Lucas, do you have any idea what it's like to come to work every day knowing that one of the most respected doctors in this hospital thinks you're worthless? Do you know how many times I went home and questioned whether I was actually good at my job? You didn't just insult me that day in the ER. You made me doubt everything I've worked for, everything I've built my career on, and you did it in front of everyone, people I have to work with every single day." Lucas closed his eyes, and I saw a tear slip down his bruised cheek. "I know. God, Peyton, I know, and I can't take it back. I can't undo the damage I caused, but I'm asking you, begging you really, to give me a chance to make this right, not just with words, but with actions. I want to be better. I want to be the kind of doctor you are, the kind of person you are." There was something about seeing him so vulnerable, so genuinely remorseful, that began to chip away at the wall I had built around my heart. I wanted to stay angry, wanted to hold on to my hurt like a shield, but I also knew that forgiveness wasn't about letting him off the hook. It was about freeing myself from the weight of carrying that pain around. I took a deep breath and spoke carefully, choosing each word with precision. "Lucas, I accept your apology, but you need to understand that trust isn't rebuilt overnight. You hurt me deeply, and it's going to take time for me to believe that this version of you, this honest and humble version, is real and not just a temporary response to almost dying. If you're serious about changing, then you need to show me through your actions over weeks and months, not just through words spoken from a hospital bed." He nodded slowly, wincing slightly from the pain of his injuries. "I understand, and I will. I promise you, Peyton, I will spend however long it takes to prove to you that I'm not that person anymore." I stood up to leave, but Lucas reached out and gently caught my hand. His grip was weak, but there was desperation in it. "Thank you. Thank you for saving my life when you had every reason not to. I will never forget what you did for me." I squeezed his hand briefly and then let go. "Just get better, Lucas. The hospital needs good surgeons, and believe it or not, you are one when you're not being an insufferable jerk." He actually laughed at that, a weak, painful laugh that turned into a cough, but there was genuine warmth in it. As I walked out of that room, I felt lighter somehow, like I had just set down a heavy burden I didn't even realize I'd been carrying. The next few weeks were strange and awkward in the best possible way. Lucas was released from the hospital after 10 days and was ordered to take a full month off to recover completely. During that time, something shifted in the atmosphere of the emergency department. Other doctors and nurses started coming up to me, sharing their own stories about times when Lucas had been unnecessarily harsh with them. It turned out I wasn't the only one who had been on the receiving end of his cruelty, but I was the first person who had responded with grace instead of retaliation. Dr. Miller pulled me aside one afternoon during a rare, quiet moment in the ER. "Peyton, I want you to know that what you did has changed the culture of this entire department. People are talking about compassion again, about what it really means to be a healer. You reminded all of us why we got into medicine in the first place, and I think we needed that reminder desperately." I felt my cheeks flush with embarrassment. "Dr. Miller, I just did what any decent person would do. I don't think I deserve all this praise." He shook his head firmly. "That's where you're wrong. Most people wouldn't have done what you did. Most people would have let their hurt and anger cloud their judgment, but you rose above it, and that takes a strength of character that's incredibly rare. I've been practicing medicine for 30 years, and I can count on one hand the number of people I've met who have that kind of moral courage." When Lucas finally returned to work, he was different in ways both obvious and subtle. He walked a little slower, spoke a little softer, and most importantly, he listened. Really listened. The first day back, he called a meeting with the entire trauma team and did something that shocked everyone. He apologized publicly for his behavior, not just to me, but to every single person he had ever mistreated. He acknowledged his arrogance, his cruelty, his complete disregard for the feelings and expertise of the people around him. "I've spent the last month thinking about the kind of doctor I want to be, the kind of person I want to be," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "And I realized that technical skill means nothing if you don't have humanity to back it up. I was so focused on being the best that I forgot to be good. That changes today. I'm committing to working with all of you as a team, respecting your expertise, following protocols even when they seem inconvenient, and treating every single person in this hospital with the dignity they deserve." The room was silent for a moment, and then something unexpected happened. One by one, people started clapping. It started slowly, just a few people, but then it grew into genuine applause. Lucas looked genuinely moved, his eyes shining with unshed tears. After the meeting, he approached me privately. "Can we talk? Maybe grab coffee after your shift?" I hesitated for a moment, old wounds still tender, but then I nodded. "Sure, there's a place across the street." That evening, we sat in a small cafe that was a favorite hangout for hospital staff, surrounded by the comforting smell of fresh coffee and the low murmur of conversation. Lucas ordered a black coffee, I got my usual caramel latte, and for a few minutes, we just sat there in comfortable silence. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said in the hospital," Lucas began, wrapping his hands around his coffee cup. "About how trust needs to be rebuilt through actions, not words. I want you to know that I take that seriously. I'm not asking you to forgive me completely right now or to be my friend or anything like that. I just want the chance to show you that I've changed." I took a sip of my latte, considering his words carefully. "Lucas, I appreciate that. And I have to admit, seeing you apologize to the entire team today was powerful. But I need to ask you something. And I need you to be completely honest with me. Why were you really so cruel to me specifically? You said you were jealous, but I feel like there's more to it than that." Lucas looked down at his coffee, his jaw working as he struggled to find the right words. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "My younger sister was a nurse. Her name was Emma. She was brilliant, compassionate, and she followed every protocol to the letter, just like you. She worked in a small hospital in rural Pennsylvania, and one night a doctor, a surgeon who thought he knew better than everyone else, convinced her to skip a safety protocol because he was in a hurry. There was a complication during surgery, a massive hemorrhage that could have been prevented if they had followed the proper steps. Emma tried to intervene, tried to insist that they stop and follow protocol, but the surgeon overruled her. The patient died on the table." My heart sank as I listened, beginning to understand where this was going. Lucas continued, his voice thick with emotion. "Emma was destroyed by that death. She blamed herself even though it wasn't her fault. She fell into a deep depression and eventually left nursing altogether. She works in a bookstore now and she's happy enough, I guess. But she lost her calling because some arrogant doctor couldn't handle being told he was wrong. When I see you standing your ground, insisting on following protocols even when doctors like me push back, you remind me of Emma. You remind me of everything she stood for, and instead of respecting that, I punished you for it because deep down, I was terrified that I was becoming the same kind of doctor who destroyed my sister's career." Tears were streaming down my face now, and I didn't even try to hide them. Everything suddenly made sense. The intensity of his anger, the personal nature of his attacks, the way he seemed almost desperate to break me. He wasn't really angry at me at all. He was angry at himself, angry at the doctor who had ruined his sister's life, angry at a medical system that sometimes prioritizes ego over safety. "Lucas, I'm so sorry about Emma. That must have been devastating for your whole family." He nodded, wiping at his own eyes. "It was. My parents never really recovered from seeing her so broken. And the worst part is, the doctor who caused all of it faced no real consequences. He's still practicing, still cutting corners, still putting patients at risk. I think part of me became him without even realizing it. I convinced myself that speed and confidence were more important than caution and protocol, and I took out my anger about what happened to Emma on you because you represented everything I had failed to protect." We sat there for a long time, just letting the weight of his confession settle between us. Finally, I reached across the table and placed my hand over his. "Thank you for telling me that. It doesn't excuse what you did, but it helps me understand it. And for what it's worth, I think Emma would be proud of the changes you're making now. It takes real courage to face your own demons and choose to be better." Lucas looked up at me with an expression of such profound gratitude that it almost broke my heart all over again. "Do you think we could start over? Not forget what happened, but maybe build something new from here?" I smiled, feeling a strange sense of hope blooming in my chest. "I think we can try, one day at a time, one shift at a time." From that day forward, Lucas kept his promise in ways both big and small. He started arriving at the hospital early to review protocols with the nursing staff, asking questions instead of barking orders. He created a safety committee that gave nurses and other hospital staff equal voice with doctors in discussing patient care procedures. He even started a mentorship program for new residents, teaching them not just surgical techniques, but also the importance of humility and teamwork. But the most remarkable change was in how he treated me specifically. Lucas went out of his way to acknowledge my contributions in front of others, to ask for my input during complex cases, and to defer to my expertise when it came to patient care protocols. At first, some of the other doctors found it strange seeing Lucas Grayson, the former king of arrogance, willingly taking direction from a nurse, but eventually it became the new normal. About 2 months after his accident, we had a case that really tested whether Lucas's transformation was genuine or just surface level. A teenager came into the ER after a motorcycle accident, multiple fractures, and internal bleeding. Lucas was the attending surgeon, and as we were prepping for emergency surgery, he wanted to proceed immediately. I noticed something on the boy's chart that gave me pause. "Dr. Grayson, wait. He has a note here about a potential allergy to the anesthetic we're planning to use. It's not confirmed, but his mother mentioned it during intake. We should do a quick allergy test before we put him under, even though it will delay surgery by 15 minutes. The old Lucas would have exploded at this suggestion, would have accused me of wasting precious time, would have overruled me completely. The entire surgical team held their breath, waiting to see how he would respond. Lucas stopped, looked at the chart, looked at me, and then nodded slowly. "You're absolutely right, Peyton. 15 minutes now could save this kid's life later. Let's run the test." It turned out the boy was severely allergic to that particular anesthetic. If we had proceeded without testing, he likely would have gone into anaphylactic shock on the operating table, potentially dying from the very procedure meant to save him. After the successful surgery using an alternative anesthetic, Lucas found me in the break room. "That's the second time you've saved a life that I would have endangered with my impatience. I owe you more than I can ever repay, Peyton." I shook my head, smiling. "You don't owe me anything, Lucas. We're a team. That's how this is supposed to work." He sat down next to me, and there was something different in his expression, something warm and almost tender. "Can I ask you something personal?" I felt my heart skip a beat, suddenly nervous for reasons I couldn't quite explain. "Sure." Lucas took a deep breath, seeming uncharacteristically uncertain. "Would you maybe want to have dinner with me sometime? Not as colleagues, not as a thank you, but as two people who might enjoy getting to know each other outside of this hospital?" I was completely caught off guard. In all the weeks of his transformation, it had never occurred to me that his feelings toward me might be evolving into something more than professional respect and personal gratitude. I looked at him carefully, searching his face for any sign that this was some kind of joke or manipulation, but all I saw was genuine vulnerability and hope. "Lucas, I don't know if that's a good idea. We work together and things are finally good between us professionally. What if dating complicates everything?" He nodded, accepting my hesitation without argument. "I understand, and you're right to be cautious. I've given you plenty of reasons not to trust me. But I also think that what we've been through together, the way we've both grown and changed, that's not something that happens every day. I'm not asking for a commitment or even a second date. I'm just asking for one evening where we can be Peyton and Lucas, not Nurse Rivera and Dr. Grayson, and see if there's something worth exploring." I thought about it for a long moment, weighing all the risks and possibilities. Finally, I smiled and said, "One dinner, but you're paying, and it better be somewhere nice because I definitely earned it." Lucas's face lit up with a smile so genuine and joyful that it transformed his entire appearance. "Deal. Friday night, 7 o'clock. I know a place." That Friday, I spent an embarrassing amount of time trying to figure out what to wear. It felt ridiculous to be so nervous about a date with someone I saw every day at work, but this was different. This wasn't the arrogant surgeon who had made my life miserable, or even the reformed doctor who had apologized so sincerely. This was potentially the beginning of something entirely new, and that both excited and terrified me. Lucas picked me up at my apartment, and I almost didn't recognize him in civilian clothes, dark jeans, a crisp button-down shirt, no white coat or surgical scrubs in sight. He looked younger somehow, more relaxed, and when he saw me, his eyes widened with obvious appreciation. "Wow, Peyton, you look absolutely stunning." I felt my cheeks warm. "You clean up pretty well yourself, Grayson." He took me to a small Italian restaurant tucked away in a quiet neighborhood, the kind of place that locals love but tourists never find. The atmosphere was warm and intimate, candlelight flickering on checkered tablecloths, the smell of fresh bread and garlic filling the air. We ordered wine and pasta, and for the first time since I'd known him, we just talked as two regular people without the weight of the hospital hanging over us. Lucas told me about growing up in Pennsylvania, about how his parents had both been teachers and had instilled in him a love of learning from an early age. He talked about Emma with obvious affection, describing her not as the broken person she had become, but as the vibrant, passionate nurse she had been before everything fell apart. He shared stories about medical school, about the pressure to be perfect, about gradually losing himself in the pursuit of excellence until he couldn't remember who he had been before. I found myself opening up in return, telling him about my own family in San Antonio, about my grandmother who had raised me after my parents died in a car accident when I was 12. I talked about how losing them had made me obsessed with saving lives, with making sure that no one else lost someone they loved because of a preventable mistake. I shared my dreams of maybe one day becoming a nurse practitioner, of having more autonomy to make medical decisions while still maintaining that close patient care that I loved so much. "You would be an incredible nurse practitioner," Lucas said earnestly. "You have the clinical knowledge, the compassion, and the backbone to stand up for what's right, even when it's difficult. Actually, I've been thinking about this a lot lately, and I want to help make that happen for you. The hospital has an educational assistance program for staff who want to advance their careers. I could sponsor your application and write you a recommendation that would basically guarantee approval." I was genuinely touched by the offer, but I also felt that familiar wariness creeping in. "Lucas, that's incredibly generous, but I don't want special treatment because we're whatever we are. I want to earn it on my own merit." He reached across the table and took my hand, his touch warm and gentle. "Peyton, you have already earned it 10 times over. This isn't special treatment. This is me using whatever influence I have to help someone who deserves it get the opportunities they should have had all along. But I understand if you want to do it completely on your own, and I respect that. Just know that the offer stands. No strings attached, whether this works out between us or not." The evening passed in a blur of good food, better conversation, and a growing sense that maybe, just maybe, this could actually work. When Lucas walked me to my door at the end of the night, there was an awkward moment where we both seemed unsure of what came next. Finally, he leaned in slowly, giving me plenty of time to pull away if I wanted to, and kissed me softly on the cheek. "Thank you for giving me this chance, Peyton. I know I don't deserve it, but I promise I won't waste it." I smiled up at him, feeling butterflies in my stomach like a teenager on her first date. "Good night, Lucas. I had a really wonderful time." As I closed the door behind me and leaned against it, I couldn't stop smiling. Who would have thought that the man who once said he hated me, who made my life miserable for months, would turn out to be someone I could actually care about? The next few months were a whirlwind of change for both of us. Lucas and I started dating officially, though we tried to keep it relatively low-key at work to avoid gossip and complications. It was hard sometimes, maintaining professional boundaries during our shifts when all I wanted to do was kiss him in the supply closet like characters in a medical drama. But we managed, and in some ways, the challenge of it made our relationship even stronger. Lucas continued to transform not just as a doctor, but as a person. He reconnected with Emma, having long conversations with her about what had happened and how he had let his anger about her situation poison his own behavior. Emma even came to visit San Antonio once, and Lucas arranged for the three of us to have dinner together. She was quiet and a bit shy, but I could see the intelligence and compassion that Lucas had described, and by the end of the evening, she hugged me tightly and whispered, "Thank you for saving my brother's life and for helping him find himself again." But just when everything seemed to be falling into perfect place, life threw us another curveball. It was a Tuesday morning, about 6 months after Lucas's accident, when he collapsed during a routine surgery. One moment he was performing a procedure with his usual skill and focus, and the next moment he was on the floor, unconscious, his surgical team panicking around him. They rushed him to the ER, and I was the first person they called. My hands were shaking as I ran to his side. They were already running tests, checking vitals, trying to figure out what had happened. Dr. Miller took me aside, his face grave. "Peyton, I need you to stay calm. Lucas is stable for now, but his collapse wasn't random. We're running a full panel, but I have a suspicion about what we're going to find." 20 minutes later, the test results came back, and the news hit me like a freight train. Lucas had developed a rare complication from his accident, a slow bleeding in his brain that had gone undetected for months. He needed immediate surgery, and it was high risk. There was a real possibility that he wouldn't survive, or that he would survive, but with severe neurological damage. I sat by his bed while they prepped him for surgery, holding his hand and fighting back tears. He was conscious now, groggy but aware of what was happening. "Hey," he said softly, squeezing my hand. "Don't look so worried. I've got the best medical team in Texas, and I've got you. That's all I need." I tried to smile but couldn't quite manage it. "Lucas, you have to fight. You have to come back to me. We've barely started our life together, and I'm not ready to lose you now." He reached up and touched my face gently, wiping away a tear that had escaped despite my best efforts. "Peyton Rivera, you are the strongest, most incredible woman I have ever met. You saved my life once with your blood, and you saved my soul by showing me what it means to be a good person. If I don't make it through this surgery, I need you to know that meeting you, falling in love with you, was worth everything. You made me want to be better, and you made me believe that I could be." His words broke something open inside me, and I couldn't hold back the tears anymore. "Don't you dare talk like you're saying goodbye, Lucas Grayson. You're going to make it through this surgery, and then you're going to spend the rest of your life proving to me that you meant all those beautiful things you just said." He smiled, that genuine, warm smile that I had grown to love. "Yes, ma'am. I'll see you on the other side." They wheeled him away to the operating room, and I was left standing in the empty hallway, feeling more helpless than I had ever felt in my entire life. When I had donated blood to save Lucas months ago, I had been in control, actively doing something to help. But now all I could do was wait and pray, and hope that the universe wasn't cruel enough to give us this second chance at happiness only to rip it away. The surgery lasted 8 hours. 8 hours of pacing the waiting room, drinking terrible vending machine coffee, and jumping every time a door opened. Emma flew in from Pennsylvania and sat with me, neither of us speaking much, but drawing comfort from each other's presence. Other nurses and doctors from the hospital stopped by to offer support, many of them sharing stories about how Lucas had changed, how he had inspired them to be better versions of themselves. Dr. Miller finally emerged from the operating room, still in his scrubs, his face exhausted but unreadable. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might explode out of my chest. "He made it," Dr. Miller said, and I felt my knees go weak with relief. Emma caught me before I could fall, both of us crying and laughing at the same time. The surgery was successful, and we were able to repair the bleeding. He's going to need extensive recovery time, probably several months before he can even think about returning to work. But barring any unforeseen complications, he should make a full recovery. I wanted to see him immediately, but they made me wait until he was out of recovery and settled in the ICU. When they finally let me in, Lucas was unconscious but stable, connected to various monitors and IVs, looking pale and vulnerable. I pulled a chair up to his bedside and took his hand, just like I had done months ago when our roles were reversed. "You did it," I whispered. "You fought and you won. Now you just need to rest and get better, because we have a whole life to live together." Lucas woke up 2 days later, and the first thing he did when he saw me was smile. "I told you I'd see you on the other side." I laughed through my tears, leaning down to kiss him gently. "You scared the hell out of me, Grayson. Don't ever do that again." Over the next few weeks, I barely left Lucas's side except when absolutely necessary for work. I helped him through the painful early stages of recovery, the headaches and nausea, the frustration of being weak and dependent on others. He was a terrible patient at first, stubborn and impatient, wanting to push himself too hard too fast. But gradually, he learned to accept help, to let people care for him the way he was learning to care for others. One afternoon, about 3 weeks into his recovery, Lucas asked me to help him take a walk around the hospital grounds. It was a beautiful spring day, warm sunshine and a gentle breeze, the kind of day that makes you grateful to be alive. We walked slowly, Lucas leaning on my arm for support, neither of us in any hurry. We found a bench under a large oak tree and sat down, watching the world go by. Medical staff rushing between buildings, patients and families coming and going, the constant motion of a hospital that never sleeps. "I've been thinking a lot during these past few weeks," Lucas said quietly, "about life and death, about what really matters, about who I want to be for whatever time I have left on this earth." I looked at him, seeing the seriousness in his expression. "And what have you decided?" He turned to face me, taking both of my hands in his. "I've decided that I want to spend the rest of my life with you, Peyton. I know it's fast, and I know we've been through hell and back, but almost dying twice in 6 months has a way of clarifying things. You are the best thing that has ever happened to me, and I don't want to waste another moment not being completely honest about how I feel." My heart was racing, and I had a feeling I knew where this was going, but I couldn't quite believe it was really happening. Lucas reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "I bought this 2 weeks ago, right before my collapse. I was planning some elaborate romantic gesture, but life doesn't always give us the perfect moment. Sometimes we have to make our own perfect moments out of whatever we've got." He opened the box to reveal a simple but beautiful diamond ring, classic and elegant, exactly the kind of thing I would have chosen for myself if I had been picking it out. "Peyton Rivera, will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of the incredible gift you gave me by saving my life and teaching me how to live it properly?" I was crying again, happy tears this time, tears of joy and disbelief and overwhelming love. "Yes," I managed to say through my tears. "Yes, of course I'll marry you, you stubborn, reformed jerk of a surgeon." Lucas slipped the ring onto my finger, and then he pulled me close and kissed me with a passion and tenderness that made the entire world disappear. In that moment, sitting on a bench outside the hospital where we had both nearly lost everything, I felt more certain of my future than I had ever felt about anything in my life. The announcement of our engagement sent shockwaves through the hospital in the best possible way. People who had witnessed our initial animosity, who had seen the dramatic reversal of fortune when I saved Lucas's life, now got to see the final chapter of our unlikely love story. Dr. Miller gave a toast at the hospital's monthly staff meeting, talking about how our relationship represented the best of what healthcare could be. Professionals who challenged each other to be better while never losing sight of their shared mission to heal and help. Lucas's recovery continued to progress well, though it was slow and sometimes frustrating for someone as naturally impatient as he was. I took a leave of absence from work to care for him full-time during the most critical weeks, and in that time, we grew even closer, learning each other's quirks and habits, figuring out how to be partners in every sense of the word. Emma visited often, and watching Lucas reconnect with his sister, seeing the healing that was happening in their relationship, filled me with a profound sense of hope. One evening, about 2 months after his surgery, Lucas and I were cooking dinner together in my small apartment kitchen. He was finally strong enough to stand for extended periods without getting dizzy, and he insisted on helping even though his knife skills were still a bit shaky from the lingering neurological effects of his surgery. We were making pasta, nothing fancy, just a simple tomato sauce with fresh basil from the plant on my windowsill, and we were laughing about something silly when Lucas suddenly stopped what he was doing and looked at me with an intensity that made my breath catch. "What?" I asked, self-consciously touching my face. "Do I have sauce on my nose or something?" He shook his head slowly, setting down the wooden spoon he had been using to stir the sauce. "No, I just had this moment where I looked at you standing there laughing and cooking in your ridiculous apron with the cartoon cats on it, and I realized that this is what happiness looks like. Not the operating room glory, not the accolades or the reputation or any of that stuff I used to think mattered. Just this, just us, just being together and building a life." I felt tears welling up again, and I mentally cursed myself for becoming such a crier since we had gotten together. "Lucas Grayson, if you keep saying things like that, I'm going to turn into a permanent puddle of emotions." He pulled me close, wrapping his arms around me despite the fact that we were both covered in flour and tomato sauce. "Good. I spent too many years being cold and closed off. I like the fact that you make me feel everything so intensely that I can't help but express it." We stood there in the kitchen for a long time, swaying slightly to music that only we could hear, until the smell of burning garlic reminded us that we had food on the stove. We salvaged dinner, barely, and ate it while watching a medical drama on TV and laughing at all the inaccuracies. It was perfect in its imperfection, ordinary in the most extraordinary way. 3 months after his second surgery, Lucas was finally cleared to return to work on a limited basis. The first day back was emotional for both of us. I watched him put on his white coat and check his pockets for his stethoscope and pens, the same ritual he had performed thousands of times before. But now there was a different energy to it. He wasn't doing it out of ego or ambition. He was doing it because he genuinely wanted to help people, to use his skills in service of something bigger than himself. His first surgery back was a relatively simple appendectomy, with Dr. Miller supervising just to make sure everything went smoothly. I scrubbed in as the attending nurse, and as we worked together in that operating room, I was struck by how far we had both come. The man who had once screamed that he hated me was now looking at me with love and trust, deferring to my judgment, working with me as a true partner. The surgery went flawlessly, and when we were closing up, Lucas looked at me over his surgical mask and winked. Such a small gesture, but it made my heart soar. As the weeks turned into months, Lucas and I fell into a comfortable rhythm. We worked opposite shifts sometimes to make sure someone was always available for emergencies. But we made it a point to have at least 3 dinners together every week, date nights where we would forget about the hospital and just focus on each other. We went hiking in the Texas Hill Country, tried cooking recipes from different cuisines, and usually failed spectacularly, but had fun anyway. Visited art museums and argued playfully about modern art. Built a life together piece by piece. We set a wedding date for the following spring, exactly 1 year after Lucas's first accident. It felt symbolic somehow, a way of reclaiming that dark moment and transforming it into something beautiful. Emma agreed to be Lucas's best woman, breaking with tradition but feeling absolutely right for us. I asked my best friend from nursing school to be my maid of honor, and we started planning a simple ceremony in the hospital chapel, followed by a reception in the garden courtyard. But about 2 months before the wedding, something happened that would test our relationship in a completely unexpected way. A new doctor joined the trauma department, Dr. Marcus Webb, and he was everything Lucas used to be. Brilliant, arrogant, dismissive of nurses and support staff, convinced that his way was the only right way. Watching him interact with the team was like watching a painful replay of Lucas's worst moments, and I could see it bothering Lucas deeply. One day, Dr. Webb made a particularly cruel comment to one of the younger nurses, reducing her to tears in the middle of the ER. I stepped in immediately, calmly but firmly telling Dr. Webb that his behavior was unprofessional and unacceptable. He laughed in my face and said, "Who are you to tell me how to run my department? You're just a nurse. Stay in your lane." Before I could respond, Lucas appeared seemingly out of nowhere. His face was calm, but there was steel in his voice when he spoke. "Dr. Webb, I need to see you in the conference room immediately. Peyton, please continue with patient care. I'll handle this." I wanted to argue, wanted to fight my own battles, but I also recognized that Lucas needed to do this, needed to confront the ghost of who he used to be. Later that evening, Lucas told me what had happened in that conference room. He had sat Dr. Webb down and told him everything, the whole story of how he had once been exactly like Webb, how his arrogance had nearly cost him everything, how a nurse named Peyton Rivera had saved his life and taught him what it meant to be a real doctor. He explained how the hospital had changed its culture to prioritize respect and collaboration, and how Dr. Webb could either adapt to that culture or find somewhere else to work. "What did he say?" I asked, curled up next to Lucas on the couch. Lucas sighed, running his hand through his hair. At first he was defensive, said I was being soft, that the old ways worked, but then I showed him something. He pulled out his phone and showed me a video I had never seen before. It was from the night of his first accident, security camera footage from the ambulance, Bay, showing me standing there covered in his blood, making the decision to donate despite everything he had done to me. I told him that the person in that video, the nurse who chose compassion over revenge, who chose to save a life even when she had every reason to let karma do its work, that person is what real strength looks like. And if he couldn't see that, couldn't learn from that, then he had no business being a doctor at this hospital. I felt tears streaming down my face as I watched the footage, seeing myself from the outside in that crucial moment. Did it work? Did you get through to him? Lucas nodded slowly. I think so. He was quiet for a long time after I showed him that video, and when he finally spoke, his voice was different, humbled. He said he would try to do better, would try to learn. Only time will tell if he means it. But I see myself in him, Peyton. I see the person I used to be, and if there's even a small chance that I can help him avoid making the same mistakes I did, I have to try. In the days that followed, we all watched Dr. Webb carefully, waiting to see if Lucas's intervention had made a difference. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, Webb started to change. He began asking nurses for their input instead of dismissing them. He followed protocols without complaint. He even apologized to the young nurse he had made cry, a genuine apology that brought tears to her eyes. It wasn't a perfect transformation, and he still had moments of arrogance, but he was trying, and that was what mattered. The wedding planning continued, and with each passing week, I felt more excited and more certain that I was making the right choice. My grandmother, now in her 80s and still sharp as a tack, flew in from Mexico where she had retired, and she pulled me aside one evening. "Mija," she said in Spanish, her weathered hands holding mine tightly. "I have lived a long life, and I have seen many things. I have seen love that burns bright and fast like a firework, and I have seen love that grows slowly like a tree with deep roots. What you and Lucas have is the second kind. You have weathered storms together. You have seen each other at your worst and chose to stay anyway. That is the kind of love that lasts forever." Her words gave me comfort on the nights when wedding stress or work exhaustion made me question everything. Because she was right. What Lucas and I had built wasn't some fairy tale romance where everything was perfect from the start. It was something much more real and much more valuable. A love forged in the fires of adversity, tested by near-death experiences, strengthened by the choice to forgive and grow and become better versions of ourselves. The wedding day arrived with perfect spring weather, sunny and warm with a gentle breeze that carried the scent of the hospital garden flowers. I got ready in one of the private patient rooms that had been converted into a bridal suite, surrounded by my closest friends and family. As I looked at myself in the mirror wearing my simple white dress, my grandmother's pearl necklace at my throat, I thought about everything that had led to this moment. The pain of Lucas's cruelty, the choice to save him anyway, the slow rebuilding of trust, the near loss of him again, and finally this, the beginning of our forever. Emma knocked on the door and peeked in, her eyes already misty with emotion. "Ready?" she asked. I took a deep breath and nodded. More ready than I've ever been for anything. The ceremony was held in the hospital chapel, a small, intimate space that held maybe 50 people. As I walked down the aisle on my grandmother's arm, I saw Lucas waiting for me at the altar, and the look on his face took my breath away. Pure love, pure gratitude, pure joy. Dr. Miller officiated, having gotten ordained online specifically for this occasion, and his words about our journey touched every heart in that room. When it came time for the vows, Lucas took my hands and spoke from the heart. "Peyton, I stand before you today as a man who has been given more second chances than he deserves. You saved my life twice, once with your blood and once with your forgiveness. You taught me that being strong doesn't mean being invulnerable. It means being brave enough to admit when you're wrong and humble enough to learn from those around you. I promise to spend every day of the rest of my life trying to be worthy of you, to be the partner you deserve, to follow protocols even when I'm impatient, and to never, ever take for granted the incredible gift of your love." I was crying so hard I could barely see to read my own vows from the card I had prepared. "Lucas, when you told me you hated me in that emergency room, I never could have imagined that we would end up here. But looking back, I realize that sometimes the people who challenge us the most are the ones who help us grow the most. You pushed me to stand up for myself, to believe in my own worth, to never compromise my values, no matter who tells me I'm wrong. And then you showed me that people can change, that redemption is possible, that love can grow in the most unlikely places. I promise to always be honest with you, to challenge you when you need it, and support you when you need that instead, to be your partner in all things, and to love you with my whole heart for as long as we both shall live." Dr. Miller pronounced us husband and wife, and when Lucas kissed me, the entire chapel erupted in applause and cheers. We walked back down the aisle hand in hand, Mr. and Mrs. Grayson, ready to face whatever came next together. The reception in the garden courtyard was beautiful. String lights hung between trees, tables covered in white linen, and food provided by that little Italian restaurant where we had our first date. Speeches were given, tears were shed, and at one point Dr. Webb stood up and surprised everyone by sharing his own story about how watching Lucas and me had inspired him to become a better doctor and a better person. As the sun set and the party continued around us, Lucas pulled me onto the makeshift dance floor for our first dance as a married couple. We swayed together to a soft jazz song, and he leaned down to whisper in my ear, "Thank you for not giving up on me, even when I gave you every reason to. Thank you for seeing who I could be when I couldn't see it myself." I pulled back just enough to look into his eyes, those gray eyes that once looked at me with contempt but now held only love. Thank you for becoming that person, for doing the hard work of change, for choosing to be better every single day. That's all any of us can do. Just keep choosing to be better." We kissed again as our friends and family cheered, and in that moment I felt a sense of completeness that I had never experienced before. My career was fulfilling, my relationships were strong, and I had found a partner who truly understood me and valued me. The journey had been painful at times, filled with moments where I questioned everything, but standing there in Lucas's arms under the stars, I wouldn't have changed a single thing, because all of it, the hurt and the healing, the anger and the forgiveness, the near-death experiences and the celebrations, all of it had led us here. As the night wound down and guests began to leave, my grandmother came up to say goodbye. She hugged me tightly and whispered in my ear, "Mija, you have taught an old woman that miracles still happen. Not the kind from the Bible where seas part and the dead rise, but the everyday miracles of people choosing kindness over bitterness, love over hate, forgiveness over revenge. That is the real magic in this world, and you and Lucas have that magic. Never forget it, never take it for granted, and pass it on to others who need to see that change is possible." Lucas and I left for our honeymoon the next day, 2 weeks in Costa Rica where we could disconnect from the hospital and just focus on being together. We hiked through rainforests, swam in waterfalls, ate fresh fruit on the beach, and talked about our future. We wanted kids eventually, maybe 2 or 3, and we dreamed about the kind of parents we would be, how we would teach them about compassion and integrity and the importance of admitting when you're wrong. But more than anything, we talked about how we could use our story to help others. Lucas had already started giving talks at medical schools about the dangers of arrogance in medicine and the importance of respecting all members of the healthcare team. I had been invited to speak at nursing conferences about standing up for patient safety, even in the face of intimidation. Together, we were starting a foundation to provide support for healthcare workers who experienced workplace harassment or bullying, with a particular focus on protecting nurses and other support staff from abusive doctors. When we returned from our honeymoon, tanned and relaxed and more in love than ever, we threw ourselves into this mission. The foundation grew quickly, supported by donations from grateful patients and reformed doctors who had their own stories of transformation. We created training programs, provided resources for reporting abuse, and worked with hospital administrations to implement policies that protected staff from mistreatment. Dr. Webb became one of our most vocal supporters, sharing his own journey of change and encouraging other doctors to examine their behavior and attitudes. The culture at our hospital continued to improve, becoming a model for other institutions around the country. And through it all, Lucas and I worked side by side, partners in every sense of the word, using the painful lessons of our past to create a better future for others. 3 years after our wedding, I gave birth to our first child, a daughter we named Emma Grace, after Lucas's sister and my grandmother. Holding her in my arms for the first time, watching Lucas's face light up with wonder as he looked at his daughter, I thought about the journey that had brought us to this moment. If someone had told me on that terrible day when Lucas screamed that he hated me, that I would end up married to him, building a life and a family with him, I would have thought they were insane. But life has a way of surprising us, of taking our worst moments and transforming them into something beautiful if we're brave enough to let it. As I sit here now, 5 years after that first accident, writing this story down so that Emma will one day understand how her parents fell in love, I am overwhelmed with gratitude. Gratitude for second chances, for the power of forgiveness, for the possibility of redemption, for the everyday miracles that happen when people choose to be better than their worst moments. Lucas walks into the room as I'm writing, carrying Emma on his shoulders, both of them laughing, and he comes over to read what I've written. He kisses the top of my head and says, "Make sure you tell them the most important part." I look up at him questioningly. "What's that?" He smiles that genuine, warm smile that I fell in love with and says that the best way to heal a broken world is one changed heart at a time, starting with your own, and that sometimes the person you think you hate the most might just turn out to be the person you're meant to love forever. I add those words to the story, save the file, and close my laptop. Emma is calling for me to come play with her. Lucas is making dinner in the kitchen, singing off-key to some classic rock song. And outside the window, the Texas sunset is painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. This is my life now. This beautiful, imperfect, miraculous life that almost didn't happen because of pride and anger and all the ways humans hurt each other. But it did happen, because when it mattered most, I chose compassion over revenge, and Lucas chose transformation over stagnation, and together we chose love. And that, I realize as I go to join my family, is the real miracle. Not the dramatic moments of life and death, not the rare blood-type coincidence, not even the successful surgeries and recoveries. The real miracle is that every single day, we wake up and choose each other, choose kindness, choose to be better than we were yesterday. That's the kind of magic that changes the world, one heart, one relationship, one choice at a time. 10 years later, Lucas and I stand in front of a crowd of medical students at the University of Texas. Our foundation has grown beyond anything we imagined, with chapters in hospitals across the country. Emma Grace, now 7, sits in the front row with her little brother Noah, watching us with wide eyes. We tell them our story, the whole truth of it, the ugly parts and the beautiful parts, the hatred and the healing. When we finish, a young medical student raises his hand. Dr. Grayson, Nurse Grayson, after everything you went through, do you believe people can really change? Or was your transformation just an exception? Lucas and I look at each other, sharing a smile that communicates everything we've learned. Then I answer, change is possible for anyone who truly wants it, but it requires 3 things: humility to admit you're wrong, courage to face your own darkness, and commitment to do the work every single day. Lucas had all 3, and that made all the difference. Lucas adds, and it requires someone who believes in you enough to give you a second chance, even when you don't deserve it. Peyton gave me that gift, and I've spent every day since trying to pay it forward by helping others find their own path to redemption. As we leave the auditorium, Emma takes my hand and looks up at me with those serious gray eyes she inherited from her father. Mama, when I grow up, I want to be just like you, brave enough to save someone who's mean to me. I kneel down to her level and cup her sweet face in my hands. Baby, I hope you never have to. But if you do, remember that being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you do the right thing even when you are scared, even when it's hard, even when no one would blame you for walking away. That's the kind of bravery that changes lives. She nods solemnly, then runs off to play with Noah. Lucas wraps his arm around me as we watch our children, and he whispers, "We did good, didn't we?" I lean into him, breathing in his familiar scent, feeling the steady beat of his heart against my cheek. Yeah, we did. We really did. And in that moment, I know with absolute certainty that every painful step of our journey was worth it to arrive at this place, this life, this love. The doctor who once said he hated me is now the man who loves me more than anything in the world. And the nurse who saved his life ended up saving herself in the process, discovering strengths she never knew she had and a capacity for forgiveness that transformed both of their futures. That's the power of choosing love over hate, of choosing grace over grudges, of choosing to see the potential in people even when they can't see it in themselves. It's not always easy, and it doesn't always work out the way it did for us. But when it does, when 2 broken people come together and heal each other through the simple act of choosing to be better, that's when real magic happens. And that magic, that beautiful, difficult, miraculous magic, is available to anyone brave enough to reach for it.